Hey, everybody, thanks for coming. We've got our panel here with us of year 3, and we have a year 4 student as well. So we will get started now. Pooja, you want to introduce yourself and let us know what's going on?
Sure. So hi, my name's Pooja. I was previously on IEA board for 2 terms. I was VP and president, so I'm really excited to be back and talk to you guys. I'm currently a 3rd-year student at Hackensack. I'm doing all of my 3rd-year rotations there. So I just finished up with my surgery rotation, which is 12 weeks, and I'm just starting IM now. Yeah, and I'm excited to talk to you guys.
Y'all could just, how about Stella? She's a year 4 student. You want to introduce yourself? Y'all could just go down the line or whatnot.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Stella. I was the president of IEA during the spring 2020 term. Pooja, I'm actually interviewing at Hackensack tomorrow, which is funny that you're there. But yeah, I'm currently a 4th-year student. I'm finishing up my rotations at Wyckoff Hospital and Brooklyn Hospital. So yeah, I will be answering any questions you guys have about applications, like residency applications, as well as just 4th-year stuff in general.
And Stella, you just mentioned that in your interviews, they were asking about IEA, right?
Yeah, are these all IEA students that are?
Yeah, this is the yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, so she was saying that they were asking about it, so that's a good thing. So stay in the club, stay in the organization, and obviously the residency committee thinks that's important, so that's a good thing. Carly?
Hey guys, I'm Carly. I was a Grand Marshal last term for IEA, and I am currently in San Jose in California doing my rotations here. I'm in a 3rd year, and I just finished IM. I'm actually taking the shelf on Wednesday, and I'm starting surgery next week. So,
Nick?
Hey, what's up, everyone? So I'm Nick. I was VP last spring for IEA. I'm also in San Jose at O'Connor with Carly. Also in internal medicine, taking the shelf also on Wednesday. But I'm going into peds next.
stop copying me, Nick.
So we definitely thank Carly and Nick for being here, being that they have their shelf coming up. Pooja just took hers. So what about that, Pooja? You were just saying how the shelf exam went?
Yeah, so it went pretty well. I felt, for me personally, it felt really similar to the level of difficulty that step 1 was. So I know a lot of you guys will probably be taking step 1 pass fail, but I think studying well for it would definitely still be of benefit, since like a lot of the questions on my surgery shelf, and I've heard about step 2 as well, are very similar to the content that is in step 1. So it kind of builds on each other. So it's really good to have a good foundation. But it wasn't too bad. It wasn't like insanely difficult. So it's like nothing to be scared of.
And then let's see, Andrea just joined us. We'll give her a second. There she is. You want to introduce yourself?
Hello. Hi, I'm Andrea. I'm a 3rd-year med student. I'm rotating at Wyckoff Heights right now, literally right now.
And Wyckoff is in New York, right?
Yes, sorry, Brooklyn, New York.
Okay, and you took your shelf exam yet?
I've taken the medicine shelf and the surgery shelf, and I'm currently in my peds rotation.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so we got a bunch of questions here. I'm gonna do my best to sift through them as we go. There's a lot of duplicates here. So one of the first question we have here is, how does the housing work during clinical rotations? Anybody?
Well, okay, so I've lived in like 2 apartments since I'm from New York, but I don't live in my like family home for where I grew up. So I did all my rotations in Brooklyn. Typically, you would come here and find a real estate agent and find a place to live. Hopefully like with friends that you're rotating with. If not, you can find a place yourself. Some apps like Roomy, if you guys haven't heard of it, it's an app on the computer as well as on your phone. You can get connected with people who are renting out their room, and typically it's a lot cheaper to live with roommates rather than like yourself. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to kind of look for places. You can look on Street Easy, you can get hooked up with like a real estate agent, like I said, and you just kind of go about doing it that way. But if you're rotating in New York City, the only downside of it is that it's pretty expensive to live here. So just keep that in mind when you guys are submitting your location rankings and whatnot.
Yeah, I think that was one of our concerns when we were researching stuff. You know, the school had said that they set the loan prices based on New York being the highest living, but we were doing the math and it still seems like it's really tight.
Yeah, it really depends. If you, for example, Andrea and I are both at Wyckoff Heights. I lived in Bushwick for the past year. I just moved down to Fort Greene recently, but Bushwick is typically a little bit more affordable. It's not as expensive as like downtown Brooklyn or Fort Greene, but if you're rotating at Brooklyn Hospital, for example, you would want to be closer to the hospital here, and the rent prices are a little bit higher. It just really depends like where you want to live. If you don't mind commuting and taking the train, you know, you can live somewhere that's not as expensive. But if you want to stay closer to the hospital, typically those areas are a little bit more pricey. So you want to probably look for roommates or try to find out what other SGU student is going to be rotating where you are and try to get linked up with them. But yeah, the loan prices, I think it definitely covers, you know, enough for just rent. I don't know about like cost of living, you know, such as like food and transportation and whatever, but that also depends on the person. If you're not somebody who uses a lot of money on the daily, then, you know, you're going to be okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like they sent at least the Term 5s an email recently, but the loans are given out in 4-month increments, right? Not 6-month?
16 weeks. So the way that it works is that you need to be in 16 weeks of consecutive rotations in order for you to receive a loan disbursement from like a refund check from the school. So let's say that you have some bridge time in between, like Christmas is coming up and a lot of you guys are getting 2 weeks off, which we didn't get. So please have a good time during those 2 weeks. But yeah, when we were in rotation, so basically let's say you have 2 weeks of bridge time, those 2 weeks are not counted towards 16 weeks. So you would be, if you are doing rotations like 8 weeks before that, before the 2 weeks off and 8 weeks after the 2 weeks off, you would be getting your loan disbursements 18 weeks after, if that makes sense. So you need to be in 16 weeks of consecutive rotations in order for you to receive it.
Now, if you did the 16 weeks and then the second 16 weeks, I mean, that covers about 8 months of the year. Can you start a third set of rotations for the last part of the year to kind of cover you through? Is that right?
Yeah,
okay.
And I'm not really sure if the school is doing the online rotations anymore, but those count towards those weeks as well. So if you're coming, if for whatever reason you are not able to start like in-person rotations on time and the school is offering you like online rotations, which for us during COVID, it was kind of the case, those online rotations also are taken into consideration for the 16 weeks that they're counting for your loan disbursement. If I don't know if that answered your question, but
Yeah, no, I think that's good. People were concerned about signing a 12-month lease and only getting 8 months of it, but that makes sense. I'm not sure, I could be wrong, but I don't think they ever mentioned anything about the online thing, maybe because COVID's kind of, you know,
right.
You know, in the past a little bit, you know. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. So what is the visa process like? Can any of y'all speak on that? Or, I mean, then we have to reach out to faculty or no?
I'm pretty sure we are all US students, so it doesn't apply to us. I know for Canadian students, you have to do visa paperwork, but I'm pretty sure it was pretty straightforward for my friends. They were just able to cross at the border and show their like proof of citizenship. But they're from Canada, so if you're from another country, you probably have a more intricate process.
So one of the people I was rotating with is from Nigeria, and she had issues with her visa coming through because it's stuff that the school has to do and that the hospital that you're going to has to do. So make sure that you keep in contact with the school and the hospital that you got assigned to so that the paperwork does go through on time.
Okay, was it possible to gain sub-internships for competitive fields? Maybe kind of what exactly is that and how does that work?
So I'll answer this since I've done a couple of sub-Is and I'm a 4th year. So it depends. I mean, it depends what they mean by like competitive specialties, but let's say if you want to go into like general surgery, which is like a pretty competitive specialty coming from SGU, you would probably need to just reach out early, and, you know, just try to look for rotation opportunities broadly. Like, you know, if you're trying to stay at like a hospital where everyone it's known to be like sub-I heavy and everyone goes there and applies there, you're probably not going to get the spot that you want. So, you know, you might have to travel to another state for a month to do it, to another hospital that's a little bit farther from you, might have to commute. But it's generally pretty straightforward. I know that there's a new policy that wasn't really followed, I think, in my third year, where you have to do 2 rotations. I think, Andrea, I was talking to you about it. You have to do 2 rotations first before you can start applying for, you have to take 2 shelf exams before you can start applying for electives or any sub-internships. But I don't know how that works, because some people start out with like internal medicine and surgery, and those are 12-week rotations each. So then people who have shorter rotations are going to be able to sign up for it a little bit quicker. So, I mean, if you want to reach out to like your physician advisor when you enter your third year, they can probably help you with that. But basically, after 2 rotations, you're supposed to meet with your physician advisor, which every one of us are assigned to. And you kind of talk to them about what specialties you're interested in, how you're doing. You guys kind of talk about your step scores, and how you're preparing for step 2 in your shelf exams. And after you meet with them, you're allowed to start scheduling your electives and your sub-I. But generally, it was pretty straightforward. I started scheduling mine before I met with my physician advisor, because I wasn't paying attention and didn't know it was a rule. But you can start scheduling electives by contacting hospitals. You contact the coordinator at the hospital, the GME office, and whatever specialty you want to apply to. And you tell them what school you're from and that you're interested in rotating there. And then they'll kind of take it, you know, they'll take it from there. Typically, they'll ask you to attach your CV. So make sure you have like an updated CV with you. Your step 1 score report, they require some rotation, some sub-I rotations require step 2 score reports, but it's very rare that they ask for that. And then unfortunately, some sub-Is require that you have like a step score minimum, but I don't think that's going to be a problem for this next class that I'm speaking to, because it's going to be pass fail. But yeah, those are just things you need to keep in mind when you are applying for sub-Is.
Right. So my class or the term 5s and onward will all be pass fail, which brings up another good question, is that being that that's the case now, letters of recommendation are going to be super important. How do y'all feel about going about obtaining those?
So I've asked a few of the doctors I've been rotating with about, you know, if they'd be willing to write letters of rec. And I think it's kind of how your relationship with that doctor develops, and, you know, how comfortable you feel with them and how much you think, you know, they like you versus how well you did and how well of a letter that they're going to write for you. And then you just have to really make sure, you know, go up and ask them before the rotation ends so that they remember who you are and that you have it planned out ahead of time. And I was just like, you know, can you write me an excellent letter of recommendation? And everyone I've asked so far has said yes.
Now, they had mentioned in one of the meetings that you'd want to try to get your letters of recommendation from a field that you plan on maybe going into residency for, correct?
That's very important.
Okay, yeah, right, okay.
So, and some specialties, for example, those of you guys who are interested in going into emergency medicine requires you to have special letters of recommendation called the SLO, and it stands for the Standard Letter of Evaluation. And in order to get a SLO, you need to rotate somewhere that has a residency program in emergency medicine, and you have to rotate there through that program in order for you to get a SLO. And they're not going to accept any other form of letter of recommendation. So that's something to keep in mind when you guys are applying to certain hospitals. If you guys want, you know, good SLOs, you want to apply to hospitals that have an EM program so that you kind of have, you know, an upper hand when you start actually looking for electives, because you'll have rotated through during your third year, if that makes sense. So keep that in mind as well.
And I remember last term, you know, we had the residency directors here, and there was a little bit of difference of opinion on whether, are y'all planning on getting your letters so you can read them first and then submitting them, or y'all just bypassing that process for letters of recommendation? I think Dr. Matthews said specifically he requested that he gets all the letters and got a bunch of them and trying to pick and choose the best ones he could get.
So I think it really just depends on like the person. I personally am not planning on doing that just because I have spoken to residency directors who see that as a red flag. And I feel like you have a good relationship with the physician and think that they're going to write you a good letter of rec, there's no reason to have another red flag on your application. Um, and also something to keep in mind is sometimes physicians will just send you or your primary advisor the letter to hold on to until it's time to apply. So that's another way that you can maybe see what letters are good because your primary advisor, for example, could see all the letters and say, oh, you have all these letters. Maybe you should submit these.
Okay, yeah, that's good advice. Well, let's take a step back real quick because a lot of us, especially the term fives, are going to be preparing for step one. Any advice there? What was your timeline? Did y'all do the 8 weeks?
Yeah, I think I think for IEA students, who have maintained a pretty good GPA over the past 2 years of medical school and MS1 and MS2, I think you guys can probably sit for step two after studying for it like 7 to 8 weeks, sometimes a little bit longer, like 10 weeks. But I think past presidents have kept like a I don't know if this is being presented, but we have like data on how IEA students perform on step one. And typically it's pretty good. Our average is pretty good. So I don't think, and it includes like how many weeks students studied and what resources they use and stuff like that. And typically we perform pretty well. So I don't think if you're not struggling in school, I think you're okay with sitting for step one without having to, take forever to study for it. But it also depends on like your NBME scores, obviously, and how you personally feel about it. Whether you're using other resources like tutoring companies or like a group tutoring session or whatnot.
Yeah, I guess it's a little difficult for us because now, opposed to shooting for a score, we're just shooting for a pass, so that, it takes a little bit away from the competitiveness. But what were your thoughts about outside resources? What did you guys use for STEP besides UWorld?
I feel like everyone used the typical like Boards and Beyond, Sketchy, UWorld as the biggest resource, and then make sure you're doing all the NBMEs. I found those super helpful. There's always like some little tidbit of information you didn't learn from UWorld or Boards or something that popped up in an NBME, and they just give you a good baseline of kind of where you're at. My biggest advice is those of you in term 5 or coming up on term 5, really use term 5 to your advantage. That's a whole entire term you get to review every single thing you've learned so far. So I use that basically as my step study period. And then I had extra 8 weeks to just make sure I powered through UWorld and got my scores where I wanted them. So I think that's to your benefit. So don't kind of slack off and be like, oh, this is just a review term. Like definitely capitalize on that time.
Anybody do anything different? People talk a lot about Amboss. Is that a thing you guys used?
I actually really like Amboss. I used RX during term 5, and then I saved UWorld for dedicated. And I also did some Amboss during dedicated as well. And from all that, I think the most important thing is to do a lot of questions. UWorld is obviously, like everyone says, the gold standard, but just make sure you're doing as many questions as you can, whether like for you that's doing UWorld twice or doing UWorld in another question bank. You want to make sure you're getting exposed to questions as much as you can, because at the end of the day, building up that stamina is what's going to help you the most during the exam. But it's also important to keep in mind that everyone studies differently. So there's going to be resources that other people might be using that don't work for you. And term 5 is a really good time to figure out what does work for you. Because if you're using resources that other people are using and they aren't working for you, you're just wasting your time. So for me, that was Sketchy. I didn't really like Sketchy and I ended up not using it. I kept trying to force myself to use it and it didn't work for me. So I kind of dumped it in term 5 and I think I watched like maybe 4 or 5 videos. Besides that, I also really, really like Pathoma. It was probably my favorite resource outside of UWorld. I felt like the videos just made a lot of sense and there's so many questions I got right on the exam because of the way the concepts were explained in Pathoma. So if you haven't tried it, I definitely recommend checking it out.
How about you, Nick? What were your thoughts?
I would say, kind of going off what Pooja said, for Pathoma, chapters like 1 through 3, how I reviewed that like the week before STEP, and there were so many questions, just based off that. If you just kind of know those basic concepts, a lot of it makes sense. And then I used, during term 5, I had lecture, and then we also had Boards and Beyond I'd watch, and then Sketchy as well. And I tried to like use the BSE to study for STEP, like as content review. And then once I was in dedicated, it was just questions and like touch up on topics that I needed. And also, like when you're doing the questions, don't just go, did I get it right or did I get it wrong? Read the explanation and kind of go back to the question and be like, okay, what pointed me out towards this answer? And why is this answer the correct answer? So that you can kind of piece it all together. So you're not just going, oh, right, wrong. You're not learning that way. You want to use UWorld to learn and not to test yourself.
So,
Okay. Oh, yeah, please.
so just to add on both what Nick and Pooja were saying, there's actually a lot of data about students doing novel questions and how that correlates to their STEP score. The more novel questions that you guys are exposed to, the higher your score is going to be. And it's because every iteration, every possibility of a question that's going to be presented to you, you've seen it before in some way or form, and that's only going to help you. So meaning if you've gone through UWorld once and you're trying to do it again, maybe instead of doing it again, maybe just go through your incorrects and then try another QBank source like AMBOSS or even Kaplan or pretest or something of that nature, so that you guys are exposed to new questions. And, for students, for high performing students like you guys, who have good grades generally and have performed well, there's really no reason to be doing the same questions over and over again. I know there's a lot of debate about whether or not to do UWorld twice, whether or not to do AMBOSS twice, and all of that. I think I'm kind of more in line with the thinking that you guys need to do more questions, more novel questions. And more than likely, you're going to run into the same topic, same type of question on these other types of QBanks anyway. So I think it's more important to kind of try these like tried and true QBanks before you guys just start doing like your QBank all over again, if that makes sense. So just make sure to keep that in mind when you guys are finishing up, even RX and UWorld and whatnot, and getting closer to your exam.
Okay, so speaking about exams, can y'all talk a little bit about the shelf exams? When do you study? Is a lot incorporated into what you're doing on the day-to-day? Are you learning on the job, or is it like you wait till you get home? How's that all work?
So I feel like that's very rotation dependent. Some, like some people you work with teach a lot more than other people. Like I'm on peds right now and they're very like quizzing you all the time. You're learning all the time. So that, helps a lot. And it's not all on me to like go home and read and do the questions, which is kind of nice because, you're putting in hours, and like one of the last things you want to do when you get home is study. But yeah, definitely using every free second to study or like do Anki on my phone or an AMBOSS block is great. And it's better, like, I feel like my biggest advice is to just start studying early in the rotation, because you never know what's going to come up or when your hours are going to be long. So use your free time like while you have it, and then you'll be less stressed towards the end.
And are you just basically doing questions? How are y'all approaching it?
So I love questions. Yeah, OME is great.
Sorry, what was that? Oh,
Online med ed. It's free
okay.
videos. So those are really great content review for step 2 and like help you start thinking about like diagnostic algorithms. I love questions. Like for step 1, for step 2, I do literally as many questions as possible from books, from UWorld, from AMBOSS. I have like copies of the pretest books and stuff that people have given me, or PDFs, so I do those as well. And yeah, Anki, of course, because I also swear by Anki.
Anybody else? Shelf exams, how's it going?
Yeah, I also really like online med ed as well. I feel like the videos are very concise, so they don't have everything you need, but it gives you a good basis to start doing questions. If you watch them, at least you have some idea what you're getting into, and then you can usually learn the rest of the material through questions. It's hard to talk about like books or other resources because I feel like every single rotation you go through kind of has different books that are good for that rotation. So you kind of just have to ask around about the specific rotations when you're going into them. But I personally didn't read any books all the way through when I did my surgery shelf. I know a lot of people do. I kind of just referenced them for like topics I was weak on. For example, like Dr. Pastana's surgery notes is like a really good one that a lot of people use. And I just read the different cases that were related to topics I was weak on. And then I just did questions on them.
So what were your hours like, Cruz? You're working on the surgery shift.
So it's honestly super different based on what hospital you're at and what team you're on within surgery. So we did 2 weeks of anesthesia at Hackensack, 2 weeks of an elective. So I did pediatric surgery. And then you do 2 weeks of a general surgery team. And then I did 2 weeks of vascular, 2 weeks of bariatrics. So it's a total of 12 weeks. And depending on what team you're on, the hours were kind of different. For most of them, you were expected to get there at around 6 or 7 in the morning. And then you finished anywhere between like 1 and 6. Our clerkship director was really good about saying how we shouldn't be there super late. Like most days we shouldn't be there past 6. There's definitely students who did stay late a couple of days if it's something they're interested in or a really cool surgery. But I think all in all, we had pretty good hours. We only had 2 weekend shifts the entire 12-week rotation, and we didn't have any overnight shifts. But I know it's very hospital dependent because I know like friends at other hospitals do have overnight shifts. But overall, I would say my hours weren't terrible for surgery. And also at Hackensack, Wednesday, we get education days when we're on surgery. So you're basically off all day, and then you'll have a couple of lectures by different doctors in the department. So for example, we would have one about like fluid balance, one about appendicitis, one about gallbladders. So it was stuff that was like related to your shelf, but then the rest of the day you got time off to study, which was really nice.
How about you, Nick? How was the internal medicine? What were your hours like?
So, for at O'Connor, it's very, they give you a lot of time to study, but that also depends on what doctor you're with. So like for me personally, I started with internal medicine, just like hospitalist. And then that was, we did rounds in the mid-morning when the doctor would arrive. And then we'd maybe do like a little lecture with her on something, or, a patient we saw, we'd go over a little bit more. And then we'd be done for the day about like 3 or 4. But I know some doctors do rounds, and then they do inpatient, and then they do outpatient as well. And it's just, it's a lot of long days. I know Carly's laughing because that
was my first
her
doctor.
schedule.
My first doctor, I basically was working like 14-hour days for the whole first 4 weeks. But I mean, I think it just is what it is. You're with each doctor, you follow along with their schedule, and that's just like, that's what his life is. He was a nephrologist. He had an outpatient clinic. He had a full inpatient rotation for nephrology and for internal medicine. So, I mean, that's just his life and what he does. So I think it's good to get a feel for that. And, I learned that I don't want to do nephrology on that rotation, but I think you get a taste of everything, and it just is super doctor dependent, and you'll figure out your schedule as it comes.
Okay, so I had a question. When do you actually pick? When do you choose? When do you choose the hospitals you want to go to? I could say for the term 5s, we're doing it right now. I think historically it's been a little bit earlier, maybe 2/3 the way through term 5. For whatever reason, we're a little late now, but that's kind of when you make your decision, or you choose, put your top 3. But you guys could speak on this. Did y'all all get your first choice, or how'd that go? How does placement go for those that don't know?
So I can talk a little bit about the general process, and then everyone can say if they got what they wanted. So they ask you to rank 3 states that you want. You don't get to rank specific hospitals. I don't know if they changed that, Brady, since I applied.
No, so we get to pick the 3 spots, and then there's a comment section where you could kind of put a hospital, and then there's another box where you could put your friends or whomever you may want to rotate with. That's all.
Yeah, so that's how it was for us too. So you get to pick the hospitals. They give you a list of all the states that have hospitals, and then you can put down which ones you want. And then there's a section for comments box where people usually put the reason they want to be at the state. If you have family in the area, or like a significant other, or any other very compelling reason that you want to be there, then you should definitely include that in the comments section, because they will try to take that into account and get you placed where you want. And then this is also where if you want to be at a specific hospital, you can put that as well. For example, I put that I wanted to be at Hackensack because I really wanted to be at a place where I could do all my 3rd-year rotations in one spot without having to move around at all. And then I also like EM as well. So I wanted to be at a hospital where EM was offered as a third year rotation. So I got to see if that was something I wanted to do or not. So I mentioned all that in my friends section. I'm also from New Jersey, so that was also a plus point. And then I wrote all that in the comment section. And then I also listed friends I wanted to be with. My friends actually all put New York as their top choice. So in my comment section, I wrote that if I ended up in New York, I would want to be with my friends, but my priority was to be at Hackensack. And so I ended up at Hackensack. So I definitely do think they try to take into account what you want.
Anybody else? Y'all got your first choice?
Yeah, I also wanted to be somewhere with emergency medicine as a third year option, and Wyckoff has that. I didn't really care so much about location. It was more about being able to stay in one spot for a year and not having to move around a lot. I felt like that would be really stressful for me. And so I get to do them all here at Wyckoff except psych. And I also get to do EM third year. So it met all of my criteria for a first choice.
I guess I was under the assumption that everyone would do emergency medicine third year. Is that not the case?
No.
It's usually an elective, I believe, that you typically do fourth year.
Wow.
A lot of
Okay.
places won't let you do an elective in EM unless you are a fourth year student. Like Lincoln Hospital, for example, won't let you do an EM elective unless you're a fourth year by your school.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know. Let's Carly, is that where you plan to go out in California?
Yeah, California actually was my first choice. I did put that I wanted to be with one of my friends out here, and we got put, she's in LA and I'm in San Jose. So same side of the country, but just far enough that we can't do anything together. But no, I did want to be California. I got my first choice out here.
And I don't know where I heard this, maybe they told us this, or maybe it's just a rumor, but the idea, the earlier you write STEP, the better chance you'll get your first choice. Is that, no, not necessarily true?
The earlier you start, I think it probably depends on start dates for specific hospitals. Like, for example, we started here, we were supposed to start August 16th. We started a week or two later or something, but the friend that I wanted to be with didn't take STEP until after that. So like clearly could not have started with me. But you also just like, you guys will not have the information to know what are the start dates at different places until you take STEP. So I think taking STEP too late may just limit your options to what's available, but it's not like the earlier you take it, the better.
Okay, but it is the case where you won't find out where you're going until they find out you passed STEP. That's correct. Yes. Okay.
Until you take.
For us, they
Sorry?
released it. So I took STEP super early, like the beginning of February, and they didn't tell us until like I think the last day to take it was like somewhere in the end of March, and they told everyone like right around the end of March when the last day was. And so some of my friends hadn't taken STEP yet and got their clinical placements, and I had taken STEP 2 months before and got my clinical placement the same day. So I don't really think that when you take STEP, unless maybe you take it late and then you're you might be after some of the start dates that some of the hospitals have, if you take it after that SGU deadline. But other than that, if you take it before the SGU deadline, I don't really think it plays into where you're placed.
Yeah, and also to kind of add on to that, like I know people who took STEP 1, like due to family reasons and other things, or they weren't comfortable, they pushed it back a little bit, and they still got kind of where they wanted to go. But also for like here at O'Connor, the only people that have been here from SGU are the ones that started all together in September, and they haven't added anybody. So some hospitals continually add students and take them, like rotate them through. Whereas O'Connor, we just started all together and we're going to be here all third year, and they're not going to like add anybody else as far as we know.
Hackensack is the same way. We had one start date and it was in August, and it's the same set of 48 students who rotate with us all year.
Yeah, we were quite surprised. We didn't realize, I mean, at least I didn't realize that Hackensack wasn't an option for January class. And yeah, so they won't let us switch either.
Really? Hackensack only does, so Hackensack only does August start dates. But I'm not sure if SGU is renewing their contract with them or not. It's kind of up in the air, so I don't know if it'll be an option in the future for anyone.
They have their own med school now, is that right? Or
they do,
affiliate?
So
okay.
I think there's like different rules about who, like who can and can't rotate.
Okay, so what are the pros and cons of doing clinicals at one hospital versus moving around?
You get to save on rent.
Yeah.
It's pretty much, like, bottom line.
Was that a major priority for you guys to try to get a hospital that does all the rotations or most of the rotations?
Yeah, I think
It was for me.
saving on rent and also just like thinking about having to, finish a rotation on whatever a weekday, take your shelf exam and then pick up and move to somewhere else that you don't really know where it's going to be. You might not find out till last minute. I mean, I had enough of a headache trying to find an apartment cross country one time. I don't really want to do that 6 more times throughout the year.
And then is there any preparation that goes into the rotations? I mean, I know y'all are just take shelf and then you jump into the next one, but you kind of just start day one and go with it?
Yeah, you have plenty of time to figure it out, I promise. I mean, I don't know if you guys disagree, but like the weekend you have your shelf exams, you just, like any other STU exam. I mean, I don't know what IEA students are like these days, but like my friends and I, we always just played and slept and ate like really good food and just, figured it out. Like the time we started getting back into lectures, the same thing with rotations. It's really hard to know what you're going to get into because every rotation is so different. And also every specialty is so different from hospital to hospital. So, you really want to, I think the only preparation that you might do is speak to somebody who just rotated through. Typically, a lot of your classmates will be in different rotations in the same hospital. So just hit them up and be like, what was this rotation like? What will be GYN like? Is there anything that I need to know? And from hospital to hospital, usually there'll be like a survival guide for each like specialty that will be circulating, and those are kind of helpful, but really there's no like prior studying or anything that you need to do unless you know in your heart that this is what you want to go into and you want to impress people and whatnot.
So what about even, I guess you could speak to some of the students that had just researched or just rotated through there to figure out which doctor specifically may be good to write a letter of recommendation or stuff like that.
So letters of recommendations are very simple in the regards that you want to get your letters of recommendations from somebody who you just really had a great relationship with. I'm applying into EM and currently interviewing for that, but the two other doctors who didn't write my SLOs, who were external EM doctors, were internal medicine doctors. And I had them write my letters of recommendation because I just vibed really well with them. They knew me. I keep in contact with them still. I see them at the hospital. We share conversations, and I knew I was confident that they were going to write me really good recommendations. It doesn't really matter. I think, for example, if you're going to surgery, you don't need all 4 of your letters to be from surgery. And I think, in fact, I would probably recommend that they all are not from surgery, right? Because kind of shows that you were a strong student broadly rather than just in surgery. You didn't just try hard in surgery, right? So, and also it's okay to, when you start your rotation, to let an attending or a preceptor know that your intention is to get a letter, right? That way they're really on the lookout to evaluate you in a really holistic manner, and they can kind of keep an eye out for, things that you can improve on and, give you advice and hit you up with connections and whatnot. So yeah, like, I guess in that sense, in terms of letters of recommendation, that's like the things that you need to keep in mind, like important things.
And are any of you guys planning on maybe applying to 2 different specialties for residency, or y'all all, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's something that a lot of students do. I know a lot of us are still at the beginning of our rotation, so we're figuring out what our plans are, but especially if you're applying to a more competitive specialty like surgery or like anesthesia or something like that. I know the school does recommend that you do apply to 2 specialties. So I think it's something that a lot of students do. You just have to get twice the amount of letters of rec and write 2 personal statements and all of that. But at the end of the day, I think it depends on you personally. What's more important to you? Do you want to be a doctor, or do you really want to be an anesthesiologist or like in EM or whatever the specialty is that you're interested in? I think that it's like a very personal choice, but I do think it's something that a lot of students do end up doing. You have to be careful because there's like a debate going on like continuously about if it's appropriate to apply to two different residency programs within the same hospital. So if you're dual applying to like IM and EM, should you apply to an IM and EM program, for example, at Hackensack or at Wyckoff, just at the same hospital? And there's doctors who say if they find out that you're applying to another specialty at their hospital, they're not going to rank you. And then there's doctors who are like, how would I even know? I'm probably not going to recognize you if you were to walk down for like an interview for the other hospital. So I think it's something to keep in mind when you're applying, that you want to be smart about it. But I do think it's something that people very commonly do.
I think if you're a really strong applicant and you know what you want to do, I think there's no reason to be applying into more than one specialty. The school will recommend for some students to apply for a backup. Traditionally, residency programs are not as competitive or not as reliant on your scores being super high, like family medicine, psychiatry, internal medicine even, right? But if you know you want to do something and you're going to be unhappy as an IM doctor or a family medicine doctor, there's really no reason for you to be applying for it. I think it's kind of better to apply maybe even for like a prelim position or something, or just take the year off to make your application stronger and do some more rotations. That's just kind of my opinion and what my mentors have told me. So for example, for me, I didn't apply to any backups. And if you feel strongly about the specialties that you're applying into, I don't think you should either. But it really depends on a lot more factors than just that. Like obviously you need to take into consideration like what your letters of recommendation look like, what your scores look like, how strongly you feel about your own application. If you feel like you're a strong applicant, and you'll know because of the guidance that you get from the school and from your mentors and whatnot. So yeah, and what Pooja said is very true. A lot of my friends who are dual applying into different specialties, a lot of them strategize so that they apply to certain programs where these specialties didn't overlap in that same hospital. So if they apply to IM at one hospital, they made sure that they didn't apply to anesthesia in that hospital, if that makes sense. So, but I think for you guys right now, like that's not something you should be like worried about. Like it's like so far, you'll figure that out like when you guys get to application season.
And Andrea, I think you're the only January class here, right? And then you wrote STEP in February. What did you do in between that and when you started clinicals?
So yeah, I took STEP really early. So I had like from February to like mid-May off essentially. Part of it was spent like working on a research project, but that didn't really take up a ton of my time. I mean, so much time. I took a big cross country road trip with my sister. Like we hiked our way across a bunch of national parks. Big proponent of work-life balance. So, if you find yourself with extra time, after STEP, if you don't need, like, I know January class gets a lot more time to study. I felt like had I taken much more time, like then, I think it was like a solid 7 weeks, like from the end of term 5 to when I took it. And I was like, if I study anymore, I'm going to go crazy or forget everything. So, it's okay. Got out of the way. It was COVID still. So yeah, have some fun. You deserve it. You just took step 1.
And that brings up a good point. So what are your thoughts about doing research during clinicals? Are any of y'all involved in that?
So it depends. So if there's a bunch of opportunities to get involved in research, either with your hospital or without them, with your hospital, who probably already have like research for residents like in place and things that are already in motion, try to get involved in as many case reports as possible, and try to get involved in things that you really are interested in. Don't just do a case report just because you think it looks good. You don't have to do 10. You can just do 1 or 2 that you can speak very thoroughly on and very passionately on, and they will ask you about it in your interviews, things like of that nature. I know at some point Stat Pearls, I don't know if you guys know what that is, or index and PubMed a lot of their articles, and basically you can get involved in that too by contacting them and be like, hey, like, are there any research topics for students that I can write an article for? And you will get index and PubMed. It's really cool, and you can be like like published as like a real author. And a lot of friends that I know that have done that too have included that in their applications, and it's been like a talking point for many of their interviews. So there are always opportunities to get involved, more opportunities depending on where you are. But I have friends at Wyckoff, where I did most of my third year rotations, who have had success in doing a lot of case reports and whatnot. So it's always available to you if you want to pursue.
Pooja, are you doing research as well?
Sorry, I was like trying to turn my mic on. So no, I am not yet. I definitely want to. Since my first rotation was surgery and it wasn't something that I wanted to go into, it wasn't something that I got involved with in research. But I think now that I'm doing other specialties that I'm more interested in, it's something I'm going to try to do. I know Hackensack does have a program specifically for research that I did not do. It's kind of like a mini course. I don't think you get academic credit for it, but you get to work with different doctors, and like they help you learn how to read articles and stuff like that. So there definitely are options if you're interested.
Okay, and then what about the grading system? I imagine the shelf exam is primarily where your grade comes from. Is there like an actual grade on your attendance and participation as well? Yes, there is.
I think
Okay.
the shelf exam is like 30% of the grade, I want to say, and the rest of it is like your evaluations, your professionalism, your attendance, all of that other stuff. There's an exact breakdown in the clinical portal, but yeah, those are the things that make it up. And I know that it's moving away from like the A plus, all of that, to like honors, high pass, just like all the rest of the SGU basic sciences grading systems are. So I believe that's what it's going to become January.
Okay, and then in regards to your WMPG and credits, how is it broken down? Is it 50-50 compared to the first 2 years about, or is it more heavily weighted in your basic sciences versus clinicals?
So at this point, I have all my core rotations in. So I think they're weighted the same. They're weighted by credit hours. So obviously the longer rotations like IM and surgery are weighted more heavily because you spend more time in those rotations. But, I think, for example, if you're starting at like an 80 or something, like it'll bring your average really high for example, if you got like a high pass on one of your exams, right? So yeah. Wait, sorry, I just have a phone call that I need to take really quick, but I'll get back really quickly.
Okay, I had another question for Stella. We'll hold off on that one. And then workload or pace similar to year 1 and year 2. I mean, obviously you take it. Is it the same? Is it not the same? I mean, I guess, you're actually working. So a little bit different there.
Honestly, I think it depends the specialty you're on, but when I was on surgery, it's kind of like you're working full time and also a student full time, because at Hackensack, at least, there's a lot of opportunity to spend time in the OR. So you could easily spend like 6 to 8 hours a day in the OR and then also have to go home and like cook for yourself and spend time studying. So I think, especially for me at the beginning, I struggled a lot figuring out a good balance of studying and doing well on rotations as well and making sure I participated in everything. But I think it definitely is a bigger time commitment, in my opinion, than first and second year, just because you are expected to study independently while being at rotations and also go home and study after that. So it's really like a long 16-hour day every single day. But with that said, especially with the longer rotations, it is more material that you're learning. But since you do have more time, there is time to still have fun and go out the same way there was during the first 2 years, especially like after your shelf exam. There's plenty of time to take a little break and study less intensely for a couple of days or even a few weeks, depending on what rotation you're on. You just want to make sure that even if you're studying less, you want to study a little bit so you don't get too behind.
Okay, I got a good existential question here. What is something that you wish you had not stressed about prior to starting clerkship, and one thing you wish you had prepared for more?
I'd say I wish I just stressed less in general. I feel like starting clinicals seems like the great beyond, that nobody knows what's going to happen when you get there, and it seems so crazy and everything's like, okay, but what am I doing all day? What if they ask me questions? It's like, okay, everyone has a first day and you're going to be fine. Like, just show up, be professional, act professional. You know what you're doing. It's your first day, so no one's expecting anything crazy of you. And you're a third year medical student. You're not saving somebody's life or killing somebody on your first day. You have plenty of people looking over everything you're doing, and you're not like, it's not that big of a deal. So number one thing I would say, stress less, don't worry about it. We've all been there. Even the doctors had their first day on rotations, and fake it till you make it, and you'll figure it out after a couple days.
Did you find, since you guys were mostly online did you find that impacted you negatively at all? Not having the hands-on experience?
I have no idea how to do physical exams. Like when I went to my first patient, I know where their heart is supposed to be. And I put my stethoscope on them and I can't hear their heart. And I know the patient has AFib and they have murmurs. So I know I'm supposed to hear all this cool stuff and I can't hear anything. All I can hear are lung sounds. So I feel like it definitely is a learning curve to go from I did have some OSCEs in person my first term. And I did get a practice with real patient or with the people during small group, but it's still such a huge learning curve. But I feel like I probably would have felt that way regardless of if I was online for a year and a half or all in person. I think I just would have felt that way maybe a little sooner if I was doing it in person. But I think the first couple of times you're going and doing a history by yourself on a real patient and doing a physical exam, you're not going to know what you're doing and you're going to feel like you have no idea what's going on. But I think everyone feels that way. There's no one I've talked to who is like, yeah, I felt totally comfortable during my first physical exam and I hit everything I was supposed to in history. I think everyone struggles a little bit at the beginning. And I think the residents and doctors honestly are really understanding of that. So when I started my first rotation, it's surgery, everyone thinks it's supposed to be daunting, but the residents were very understanding. I made it a point to be yeah, so this is my first rotation, and they were all super understanding. And even when you switch to new rotations, even if it's your fourth rotation, tell them it's your first day on that rotation because the expectations are so different on every rotation. Doing a psych patient presentation is so different than critical care, which is so different than surgery. So as long as they know that it's your first day, you're going to try and put in the effort, they're going to work with you and help you get better. So I don't think it was a huge detriment to be online and not get the opportunity to practice those skills beforehand.
And I think to add on to what Pooja was saying, it's okay to say, I don't know, that first few days, because you're going to forget something. I walked into the room and I totally blanked on everything I've ever learned. And you get more comfortable as you go. And as long as, you say, I don't know to one thing, or, oh, I forgot to ask that. As long as you asked it going forward and you show that you're learning and you're growing, they, will be very understanding about that. You just want to show that growth and that learning.
So I did this thing for every single core rotation where I walked in and just told everybody that I was new and that I didn't know anything about the specialty, and it worked in my favor. I mean, and it was a truth, right? Because I didn't know anything about the specialty. And then over time, they really do see your growth, like Nick said. And, that's, I think, most impressive than coming into a specialty, acting like you know something about it, and then, end up doing a lot of things that are wrong. And, just being a terrible student in that way who, over time doesn't grow. And I think that's what most preceptors and attendings are looking for growth. And I think that's important. And for the physical exam thing, it's really okay if you don't know how to do a good physical exam. I tell this story to every med student that I know. All my friends know that this happened. In the ED once, I did a full neuro exam on a guy who was having a heart attack because I was just so hell-bent on doing that neuro exam. And I'm going to tell you right now that it's okay. We caught it in time. Did I feel super bad about it and go and cry when I went home because I almost, killed a patient and made him do tippy toes and walk on his heels when this guy was actively having a STEMI? Yeah, I did. I was really upset about it. But you got to put it into perspective. Like, you're a student, you're there to learn, you're there to make mistakes such as that. And they're understanding about it when it happens. As long as you're willing to reflect on the mistakes that you're making and willing to tell somebody that you want them to take you through their steps and kind of teach you what went wrong, you're gonna come out on the other end as a better student. So just make sure you're open to people telling you that you're wrong, and that that there are things to improve, because there are always things to improve and to learn, right? So that's my advice to everybody.
That's a great story. So I guess this depends on the rotation, but do y'all typically deal with the residents or the attendings more?
Residents.
Mhm. Okay.
I think it also depends on the hospital, because I think there's definitely hospitals where there might not be residents for a particular specialty, in which case you would deal with the attendings more. When I did my surgery rotation, we did 2 weeks of anesthesia, and there we basically only worked with attendings. But for every other rotation I've been on, it's mostly the residents. Like, they're the ones you spend most of your day with, and you'll see the attendings when you go on rounds, or for surgery when you go into the OR. But besides that, you don't really see them. The residents are the ones who tell you what to do, like, day to day. They're the ones you like split patients with, or like ask all your questions to, for the most part.
And at O'Connor, it's actually the complete opposite. We only interact with the attendings. There's a family med residency here, but we don't interact with them really at all. Like, I interacted with one for 2 weeks out of my entire 12-week rotation for IM. Otherwise, it was just me and the attending directly.
Okay, and Stella, we could come back to this. So can you just compare kind of how, just briefly, because like I said, it may be kind of sensory overload talking about too much about year 4, but how is it different from year 3?
It's different because you're not studying anymore. And it's like the best thing ever. I haven't opened the book since I took step 2 back in July. And I feel like I'm getting dumber by the day, and I don't know what to do about it, but I still can't get myself to study. And I think it's like a good and bad thing. I think, coming from a place where I was like studying every day, trying to study for these shelf exams in step 2, and coming to this like really low stress environment where like all I have to do is show up to rotations and like, do what I'm told there, and coming home and having this free time. It's like a little bit anxiety provoking because I feel like I need to be doing something, but I'm not, but also like really nice because I have the extra time. But that's the main difference. And I will even say clinical years, like even in year 3, I don't know if the rest of you guys would agree, is just so much better, so much, I think, more manageable than it was in years 1 and 2. I'm not sure why it felt like that to me. I think it was just more, I think I got better at time management. It was the material that I was learning was just more palatable. And I just had more free time. And I think it was just better for like student wellness and whatnot. But in 4th year, it's a little bit more different, because rather than studying for shelf exams and for step 2, you're now preparing your applications for EROS and for residencies, and also doing the interviews. This year, thankfully, the interviews are still virtual. So on my interview days, I still, take the day off from rotations and do the interviews at home, which has been pretty nice, but that's how you're going to be spending most of your 4th year. So that's kind of, in my perspective, what's different. I think some other students will tell you something different and say that they're studying for step 3 and like keeping up on material, but I certainly haven't. So I don't know what else to tell you.
And you took step 2 in between 3rd and 4th year, right? In that break?
No, so I actually took step 2 in the middle of my surgery rotation because I was a little bit strapped for time. I think I could have chosen to take it between year 3 and 4 if I really wanted to, but as you guys know, with COVID, my class got, we got kind of the short end of the stick and kind of had to start rotations a month and a half later than everyone else. So we kind of had to rush to submit our applications and rush to kind of take step 2. But I just decided to take step 2 a little bit earlier, just so that I can do my sub-I in time, which was more important to me at the time, because I wanted to get slow for my residency applications and whatnot. So it really depends what your priorities are. And also, obviously, it depends what specialty you're going into and how much time you have to study for it. I think for you guys, everyone's pretty on track, especially for those of you who are going to start in May. with the January class, you guys get plenty of time to study for step 2, so don't even worry about it. Like you'll have actual dedicated time for step 2, like you're gonna have for step 1. So yeah, like you guys could take it whenever between years 3 and 4.
Okay, and this is a little far out, but were your intentions to try to rotate 4th year somewhere where you may want to end up doing your residency?
Yeah, so right, so those are called audition rotations, as you guys heard, and it's kind of like a term used to, you know, describe a rotation that you want to do somewhere where you want to match into. This is kind of like good and bad for a lot of reasons. Sometimes you rotate there and realize that you don't want to be at this residency program. It's toxic, it's not good, whatnot. And at other times it's good because it's everything you wanted and you get a letter from there and then you have a higher chance of matching. For IMGs, for students like us who are Caribbean medical students, these connections are very important. US med students have the luxury, obviously, of being from a US med school and not having our credentials be scrutinized, but we are constantly under scrutiny. So the only way that we kind of can overcome them is by going to a hospital and being an excellent student there and being recognized in that way. And I think that's very helpful. This year, unfortunately, and the year before that, these opportunities were a little bit limited because of COVID, and a lot of hospital systems, a lot of university programs were not accepting students and outside of their own medical school because of COVID, right? This is kind of being lifted for a lot of programs and it's becoming more available. VSAS and VSLO are now accepting students, but for example, for emergency medicine, which is what I want to go into and the only thing I can really speak on, CORDM came out with a statement that saying that they only are allowing students to do 2 away rotations, which you know, is enough, but you know, for somebody who wants to go into EM, you want to do a little bit more. So that was kind of restricting, and you want to follow the guidelines, right? So it really depends. You have to keep up on the rules and like what they're saying about the specialty you want to go into. And your audition rotations are very important, and they should be scheduled typically early in your 4th year, so you can get a letter and submit that to your EROS. So keep in mind, like, you know, what programs you want to go into and like, or you're interested in, and see if they are accepting Caribbean students in rotations and whatnot. And, you know, obviously that'll help you decide.
And a little bit more about being, you know, from a Caribbean school. I mean, is there anything else you could touch on for that? You know, are you rotating with students that are from state schools?
Yeah, at Wyckoff, we have USMD schools and DO schools. I think it's the same for Hackensack. I'm not sure about Brooklyn Hospital or any other hospital, but yeah, at Wyckoff, there's definitely other students.
Okay, and I think y'all touched on this. Do you get a break between the 16 weeks? That's up to you, right? When you kind of up to you, or
It depends on the hospital. So at Hackensack, they schedule your entire 3rd year for you. So we actually don't have a break through our entire 3rd year, which is 48 weeks. But with that said, we do get a couple days off here and there for holidays. So I'm off this Thursday and Friday, which is more than a lot of students get for Thanksgiving. So that's nice, but we don't get weeks off for Christmas. They're still kind of playing catch up because of COVID. So they chose to have us work through the holidays so that we can finish at the beginning of August. So we still have time to do like away rotations or electives or whatever in time for our ERAS applications. So I think it's very hospital dependent and based on when you start. So during 4th year, you definitely have a lot more flexibility, I think, to select when you want to be off. But during 3rd year, I think for most people, it's based off what your hospital kind of gives you.
I have to go because I have to do a resident meet and greet over Zoom, but it's been a pleasure. If you guys have any questions about 4th year, or if there's anything I can help you with, you can just shoot me an email. I'll leave it in the chat section, but good luck everybody. And I hope the rest of the term goes smoothly. I know you guys only have 10 days left or something like that, right?
just that? Yep, exactly. Thank you, Stella. We appreciate it.
No problem.
Hi, Stella.
Bye.
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, that was pretty much it. There was a lot of repeat questions. Was there anything else you guys wanted to add? Something we didn't talk about? Something you wish you would have known? Some advice you'd like to give us?
I feel like my biggest advice for everything, you know, step 1, rotations, whatever, is just like, don't be afraid to ask for help. SGU students are big on like the collaborative environment, something I love about SGU. And so like, there's always someone who's done it before you. They're there to help you. They're there to help you figure it out. Whether that goes for like studying for step 1 somewhere you want to do rotations. Yeah, just don't be afraid to ask. Someone will probably be there to answer all of your questions.
I think my advice would be for step one is when you're studying for it and you're taking the MBMEs and you're taking the UWorld practice test, you're gonna have highs and lows. You wanna make sure that you're peaking at the right time and that you're not, pushing that test out too far. I know people that in my term that ended in May that still haven't taken step today. And they're kind of like, they peaked, now they're coming back down. So now they're struggling because they see their scores dropping from what they were. And because they pushed out too far, they're forgetting the things they learned at the beginning. And so it's good to, make sure you set a date for your test and kind of stick to it and move it if you absolutely need to, but try to really stick to that date.
And quickly, I just had an extra question in the chat. What about non-SGU affiliated hospitals? Do y'all know the process? I think y'all are all still in, yeah. Do y'all know how that goes?
So I think basically what you have to do is you just figure out who the program coordinator or clerkship director is for that specific hospital that you're interested in or that rotation, and you just email them and try to get a spot. And then the thing to keep in mind with that is you have to pay all the fees associated with that rotation. So depending on the rotation, it could be a couple hundred or it could be a couple thousand. And you're responsible for all of that. Your tuition will not go towards that. You kind of just lose that tuition because it's not affiliated with SGU. And there's also a limit on how many weeks you can do of that. I believe it's 12 weeks, but I'm not positive on that. It could be anywhere from 8 to 12. And something else to keep in mind is the virtual electives. I know Stella talked about them a little bit, and they were offered to us as well. If you do those virtual electives, what I've heard is that counts towards your out-of-network weeks, which are weeks you can choose to do at hospitals that aren't affiliated with SGU. So if you do 8 weeks of virtual electives because you delay shelf, you might not have any out-of-network weeks left to do rotations at unaffiliated hospitals. That's what I've heard for previous students. Since I'm in third year, I can't confirm if that is the case, but that is what I've heard. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Okay, great. I think that is it, unless you guys had anything else you wanted to add. We thank you so much for your time. We know y'all guys are super busy. Carly, Nick, hope the shelf goes well. And for everybody else, elections, y'all should have gotten the email for elections. So those will be live till the end of the week. So make sure you watch the videos and get your votes in. And again, we thank y'all so much for coming. This is recorded. We will post the link and email it to everybody in case you guys want to look at it again later. And thanks again, guys. We appreciate it.